Hi, and welcome to another Friends Journal Author Chat. I'm Martin Kelly, Senior Editor of Friends Journal, and with me today is Barbara Birch. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for the opportunity to explain my feature in Friends Journal.
Sure. And the feature is the True Last Supper, and it appears in the June-July issue. And let me just read your bio here. Barbara Birch is a retired professor of applied linguistics, a member of Strawberry Creek Meeting in Berkeley, California, and a board member at Ben Lomond Quaker Center. She is author of Lectio Divina, Revelation and Prophecy, forthcoming in the Quaker Quicks series from Christian Alternative Books. Congratulations on the Quaker Quick.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I'm very pleased with that. It was unusual, I think.
In this article, you talk a lot about the Last Supper, and many Christians have this idea of the Last Supper, and they engage in it every week. But you're talking about a different kind of Last Supper. So tell us a little bit about the difference between the Last Supper you might see at a regular liturgical Christian church and what Fox might have been meaning by it.
Uh, sure. I I was raised in a mainstream Christian church, so was quite familiar with the idea of the Last Supper, referring to the evening meal in the upper room during
Mhm.
Passover. And Jesus said, gave the bread and the wine and encouraged his followers to um, commemorate him by following the same sort of ritual.
Mhm.
Uh, but I was interested to find that Quakers don't really recognize that as a sacrament, or sacraments at all for that matter. And when I saw this tract by George Fox, it really drew my attention. And especially when it turns out that the Last Supper for George Fox was the Revelation 3:20 verse where, Jesus says, behold, I am knocking at the door. If you open the door and let me in, I will eat with you and you with me. And he argued that that was the true Last Supper, because that occurred occurred after Jesus's crucifixion.
Mhm.
And in fact, it was a prophecy in the book of Revelations, which was written, they say, around 100 years after the time of Jesus. So
Right.
is that enough to go on?
Oh, sure, sure. Um, well, that is one of my favorite passages, I must admit. Um, I even lean on it sometimes in ministry. There's something so nice about this idea that Jesus, the divine, something is right there. Just we have to knock on a door and it will be given to us.
Yeah,
Is that how you feel? Or
absolutely. And I was surprised to find how many people, how many early friends um, took that verse as an inspiration in their writing. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. In my own case, I was familiar with it since I grew up in a very Bible-oriented church, and that was a verse that was quite common, for in Sunday school, etc.
oh, was it
But
okay?
I kind of it didn't really relate to me. Like most of the Bible growing up as a child, it was really old, and it was about other people, and it wasn't really directed towards me or my experience. And then in the first months of the pandemic, when we were all like crazy and panic stricken, I happened to see that verse on social media, and I had a very visceral response to that verse,
Mm,
really strong emotional response to it, because I had been struggling with disordered eating.
yes.
and and so here it was like, oh, Christ will come in and eat with me
Hmm.
and be with Christ.
Right. And
And
I always the King James version will sup with me. I know it's
Sup
an
with
archaic
you.
word, but somehow, knock and I will sup with you. It's just such a
Well, a lot of people
funny
use that
image.
word too, sup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind what version. It's all
Hmm.
good. But the response I had was really strong, and suddenly I started understanding the power of the light or spirit to be within us as we go about our daily life. And my previous idea that God was somehow out there completely just changed in an instant. And so that sort of set me on this quest to find other references that would kind of help people develop an idea of embodied spirituality,
Hmm.
spirituality that is relevant to our not just our daily lives, but our bodies and the way that we care for and think about our bodies.
Yeah, it's just for me, it's a passage that, like, if I'm feeling anxious or worried about something, or am I just sort of posing, whatever, I can just feel like, no, I can just center down, and the spirit, the inner light is right there, ready, and almost, it's up to me to accept it and to make that knock. It's
Right,
very,
right.
very
And
comforting.
yeah, absolutely. And that's where Thomas Kelly goes with when he refers to that verse, where he says, it's not, we don't really have to do anything. We just have to open the door. We don't have to go out and seek, we don't have to climb mountains. We just have
Hmm.
to open the door, and the light or spirit or whatever you call it will come in and be with us. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the best, definitely from Revelations.
Yeah.
Revelation, yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the Quakers who have played with this race. So you mentioned Thomas Kelly, and he was writing this in the 1940s, I believe. It would have been a
1940s.
speech that he gave. I myself, I think, first came across it in Samuel Bonus, and Samuel Bonus was, for those who don't know, a sort of second generation friend, um, who was kind of the first generation that grew up as a Quaker. He was a Quaker because his parents were as a Quaker, and he sort of ended up writing the book on Quaker ministry. So I got it from him. And then there was a little footnote saying that he got it from Berkeley, Robert Berkeley, who was a theologian. But of course, for me, it was like that backwards track because I grew up in church. So it's like, oh, Samuel Bonus is saying this. Oh, Robert Berkeley's saying this. And then finally I was like, oh, wait, it's from the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, you can really fall into a interesting black hole when you start looking these things up. If you don't mind, I could read one that's from James Naylor.
Oh, sure. Another
And
early first generation friend, one of the
yes,
really co-founders of Quakerism. Hmm.
yes. And so he had a tract that was named Milk for Babes and Meat for Strong Men, a feast of fat things, which I love.
It's a great title.
Naylor wrote, by supping continually with him and he with you, will you come to be filled with him that all haste and impatience and distrust will be covered and overcome with him. And so your mortal be swallowed up of the immortal till it become your whole life and being. And all your thoughts, words, and actions have their rise and being therein, so that self is seen no more. I mean, I don't know how you could get more Buddhist and still be a early Quaker than
Yeah.
that.
Was this
I
idea
love
that we
that
are
quote.
consumed by the inward light and become one with it through this supping.
Yeah, it's very non-dualistic, and I think that's what I'm looking for. And it just really opened me up to the idea of the embodied spirituality that early friends, proposed and lived in. Um, they were that's what made them quake. That's what made them
Hmm.
so filled with emotion that they, having sort of a Pentecostal experience. So I call that Quaker embodied spirituality.
Uh-huh. So how is it? you experienced it yourself, though. Has it sort of changed how you live or how you think of things?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's changed everything. So I started my quest to discover biblical and Christian and Quaker resources, you might say, for
Mm,
embodied spirituality, especially with respect to how we think about our bodies. We embodied spirituality. First of all, one of the things I found out is how much Jesus loved eating. So that was that. I mean, there's so
there
many.
are a lot of feasts and
There are a
weddings.
lot of feasts
He's
and
talking a lot about food.
Early Christians actually, that was part of their, like we have potlucks. That was part of their
Hmm.
religious observance, was to have a meal together, like the Passover meal. But then I experienced what I can only call a conversion or a convincement, because I think I was one of those Quakers that joined Quakerism because it was I could believe in the testimonies, I could believe in the way of life, etc. But it was very intellectual.
Mm,
And in the course of studying the Bible and Christianity and Quakerism, I took some courses at Woodbrook, etc. I experienced what I can only describe as a spiritual embodiment. So it's kind of the reverse of embodied spirituality, it's spiritual embodiment. And that is where you you have the intention to live your life in a united with spirit at all times. And in fact,
mhm,
spirit is like in you and around you and moving through you. Um, So its intention is the link that's between the power of love, which is the divine to me, and
mhm.
your actions and behavior. And that especially means that you have to love yourself, loving yourself as much as you love your neighbor, which I think is not easy for people. I mean, from my own experience.
Oh, sure. Lots of people need to learn how to forgive themselves and
Yeah.
um, sort of, repent, but also just to understand what we've been through and to appreciate that.
Yes, and have compassion,
Yeah.
self-compassion at all times. Whatever happens, you are my beloved child, my favor rests on you. That's another good verse.
That's a great verse too. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much of this. It's to me, it feels comforting. And I mean, sometimes I'm there in worship and I just feel like comfort envelop me. Almost like a hand on my shoulder, like it's okay, kind of thing. It's just very powerful.
Yeah,
These images that I think are real.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It's something that pervades Quakerism from the very beginning, because in almost every, thing I read, there's the two parts, the embodied spirituality, like that of God
Mhm.
on the one hand. And then there's, in the same little quote, Fox talks about your carriage and life. And then Isaac Pennington always talks about the seed
Mhm.
within us. That's very embodied. And then, the flourishing of that life is the spiritual embodiment that I think characterizes a lot of Quakers. I can remember um, when I first went into meeting for worship, when I joined Friends in the 1980s, there were so many of the people in the meeting had this quality.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
you know, that's how I explain or I talk about that quality, is that it's a spiritual embodiment. It's the way that you move through the world with spirit in you and in front of you and behind you and putting a hand on your shoulder.
Oh,
So
I
it's really
definitely relate. Yeah. I mean, I
changed my
came
life.
in the late, well, second half of the 80s. And, I was sort of into peace and pacifism and I kept running into these Quakers. I was like, there's something more that they have. It's not just the politics. And it was their carriage, It was just sort of the way they approached life. I could see there was something else, and it was like, I want to get a taste of that,
Yeah.
just by example. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I joined, but I'm not sure I ever achieved or ever will achieve that sense of spiritual embodiment. But now at least I understand what it is,
You
I
understand what
think.
it is. We're all working toward it.
Yeah,
Over
yeah,
time.
definitely. It, it's a work in progress.
Sure. Well, that's about probably all the time we have, but I love this conversation, and I hope you continue this journey and you continue sharing it with French Journal. So this is, I think, kind of the work of spiritually maturing, or sort of getting deeper and renewing ourselves.
Yeah,
And in so doing, renewing, our meetings and the world. If we can be like those people we met when we were young and coming in,
yeah,
maybe we can be
absolutely.
lighthouses too, and inspirations for others. So thank you, Barbara, and I hope we hear a lot more from you in coming years here as you share with us.
Okay, thank you. I would love to. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for talking to me.
Sure. Thanks. Take
Mhm.
care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.